Studios proudly presents the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo as your host for the almost weekly or daily, the almost monthly Zencast podcast show, talk show, performance art show. Sorry, Alex. This is the 421 episode. Hello. Namaste. Thanks for listening, friends. I've been on hiatus again. As I sometimes like to tell people, certain things in other dimensions needed my full attention, and I could not be here, not even at 10%. That's a joke on a bunch of different levels, the nerdiest of which is a particular scene in 0 Hour, but that hasn't even been drafted yet. It's just floating around in my head. But the most overt, the obvious of which is that I'm kind of referencing, real life situations. Anyways, I digress. Happy Mother Earth Day, my friends. Happy motherfucking Earth Day. And we really should own up to it and call it motherfucking Earth Day, because we're really fucking our Mother Earth pretty hard in like the skull fucking position of skull fucking, and all standing around pretending that printing more banners out of ink and plastic and creating more leaflets and glossy cardstock. Oh, sorry. Isn't this a lovely piece of music? Got to set up my personal devices to shut the fuck up mode. So, alright, that started out dark, didn't I, for the Earth Day episode. Let's zoom back, okay? Let's zoom back and get some perspective. I'm a mystic. I'm candidly and in this sort of like entertainment world sort of way, like I want to be a talking head. I want to be a public figure that speaks on this issue. I'm a cannabis mystic, not just a regular old, boring. No one knows what they mean by mystic. And I think all cannabis enthusiasts know the weird, awkward frustration, if they give a shit, of the fact that 420, April 20th, is also Hitler's birthday. And that's just frustrating. It's annoying. And it's one of those things I literally have to try and really let go of and abandon and forgive and just accept. Because I didn't know Hitler personally. And I'm not trying to get in on the Hitler apologists side of the spectrum. I will always stick to my truth that I welcome all points of view, and that I will listen to anyone express themselves, whether if that listening is on paper because they've written to me somehow, or electronically or whatnot. Curiously, not a lot of people are writing at me, although they are. I just realized they were doing it at a different place than I expected. Hint, hint. My official podcast Gmail account is dry, folks. It's dry, thirsty desert of nothing. And that's sort of like the bit I was developing was, hey, drop me an email and I'll talk about it on the air. But no one seems to be taking that bait. But everyone is posting like crazy, as they are wont to do on my Facebook page. And the traffic there seems to be increasing. So I think I might just go to that. I don't think I need special permission, right? Anybody that gets butthurt about it can can unfriend me, because it's not like anybody really listens to this podcast. So Hitler sucked, to kind of really complete my digression. No one, even if you, I don't want to be associated with Hitler things. I don't want to be associated with any kind of Aryan white nation, supremacy movement. I don't want to be, and of course, it's a fine line, right? It's comedy. There was actually a few select statements and memes yesterday, on the actual date of 4/20, that were quite comedic, that referenced the sort of tension there with Hitler's birthday sort of looming in the background, like some sort of Darth Maul type character just walking on to camera for the first time. So let's just acknowledge that that's something we can't control. That'll always be Hitler's birthday, but fuck Hitler. And fuck people who like Hitler, because whether he was real or imaginary or a government conspiracy to re-engineer history, or whether he was whatever you believe, the fact of the matter is that the word itself, Hitler, is now tainted, just as is the word and the image of a swastika. Now, I'm not trying to. People might be listening, going, "Where the fuck is this guy going with this?" Let me tell you where I'm going with this. The Nazis stole the icon that is now permanently, associated with this negative thing. And many people are aware of this. It's not like a completely forgotten fact, but I think a vast majority of people who might be triggered by the image or the graphic of it don't realize that it originates from a deep mystic source. And only kind of Nazi nerds, or World War II, pardon the Freudian slip, World War II nerds really know that the faction really was into the occult and doing research into it and sort of reappropriating it whenever they felt the whim. And some are boggled by that, but actually it's not a very shouldn't be very confusing at all, because it's an ancient practice. We have always done that. We, as a tribal species, we've always developed culture and counterculture, and then reappropriated the culture that survives, reappropriates things from the cultures that do not survive, the clashes that we create, because we live in a matrix of conflict, and have for a very long time, longer than most people realize. People talk about or argue about or debate about brainwashing, and they think about really contemporary concepts here and now, but the brainwash has been going on since before the Tower of Babel. Now, what's interesting? We've come full circle. What else has been going on since the Tower of Babel? And that's the objectification, commodification, destruction and consumption, and basic, what's the word I'm looking for? The devaluation. I guess that meant to go up earlier than the list. The dehumanization, the demotherization of our mom, the womb that bears us, that is giving birth to us, that bore ourselves into livingness, into flesh. That's this place. And we're spending a lot of time arguing about how to perceive this place. And so much so that it's become expressed in one of those comic human expressions. But that's what we do. We take an idea and beat it to the ground until we, go, aha, that idea was my head. Why was I beating my head into the ground? But there's an explosion of flat Earth versus round Earth debate. And that debate is null and void, friends. There's no point in arguing that division, because it's a mutually negating false dichotomy. The question isn't, is she flat or round? The question is whether or not we can remember and reconnect our perceptive ability to interact and engage with Mother Earth as our energetic, spiritual, body, flesh, mother being, meta being, and respect that she is indeed, unto herself, a living, sentient, knowing, conscious person being, just like we are, but in a much larger scale and operating in many other levels of reality that we cannot comprehend at this time. We might be able to gain understanding of them in the future, or what we call the future, if we stop engaging in this neglectful, abusive web of relationship with our mom. That's what Earth Day should be about. That's what every day should be about. So forgive me if I opened Earth Day with a bit of a hard slam. This is my deepest passion in the spectrum of things that I like to ramble about. The relationship with our mother is sort of primal and takes primacy and is sort of part of the driving force behind every silly thing that I create. And here's why. As an intuit or an intuitive, as a spiritual person that sort of woke up prematurely into their spiritualism as a child, not as an adult, with a lot of preconceived notions already baked in, I understand very clearly that we are so close to sort of being aware as a species of this powerful relationship, this tangible, real thing that's right there in front of our face, that's part of us, that gives birth to us, that we are ignoring, that we're relating to in our mind and in our spirit as though it didn't, wasn't who and what it is, which it is. So today, instead of just focusing on like the pragmatic arguments and strategies around specific issues, which is always awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to pick a fight there. Because people get caught up in like the expression of the reason why we shouldn't allow fracking. Fracking is a great example because it is so violently destructive and crazy. Instead of just pulling things out of the ground, which we may or may not have any right or business doing in the larger scale of organic logic, of organic understanding of the process that's going on here, it may be a horrible idea. Or, who knows, I could be totally wrong about this. What's his name? Oh, rest, bless his soul. I can't remember his name right now. Not Ben Carson. Ben Carson wants, that's the word that wants to come out of my mouth. But and bless his soul too. That's not the one I want to talk about right now. No offense to Ben Carson. George Carlin. George Carlin had a bit. I only remember seeing it once or twice on the internet, but it's floating around, where he basically proposes, and I can't even paraphrase it correctly, but I know what the thrust was, which is basically, what if Mother Nature wanted us to coat her in plastic? Because that's what we're doing, folks, and that's what we have been doing in a disgusting way ever since we discovered oil and started pulling out the lifeblood from the very bone marrow of the womb that gives birth to us. Very kind of rude thing to do, right? Hi, Mom. Let me sucker punch you in the ovaries and then start just ripping out your insides. Obviously, a lot of people who cling to the ideas and or the objects associated with any of the industries that could be categorically labeled as mother fucking or mother destroying or mother, the toxic to mother, they would argue, well, this is hyper personification of a place. My response to that is no. It is the result of my language this way, talking about it this way, is the result of the direct experience of it as not a place, as something much larger and much more important than just a place that we walk upon. And that's ideological clinging that's very difficult to approach. It triggers cognitive dissonance and confusion and anger in folks to question. That's why that's why it's feisty and weird. It's funny to watch people argue about flat Earth. But I think that there's a delightful, very instructive meme. I cannot take credit for it, but it's such a lovely thing. It's become part of my routine. So for those who don't know me very well, I find that, and if you spend enough, and I've been on the internet for a long time, I've been on the internet having open-minded, honest, like, I'll really listen to you if you'll really listen to me types of conversations with other human beings that live far away, since long before Vice President Al Gore claimed to have invented the internet. Because that's, we've always done this on the internet. For those curious about internet history, it's not like there was never a way to have flame wars. Or we invented flame wars before shit like Facebook and Snapchat existed, or Facebook and Twitter. We invented Twitter wars before there was Twitter on the internet. At any rate, I digress. So we're not sure. Like, it's highly unlikely, I think, that Mother Nature wants us to rip open her insides, to consume, to destroy the minerals and whatnot, and turn it into useless stuff that we don't really need, especially the toxic stuff, and then burn it and destroy it again, so that it can then pollute all of her systems. Because we pollute her breath, we pollute her blood, we pollute, every kind of system you can make that is analogous to the things you'd want to keep healthy in yourself exist in her, capital H. And to continue to live this status quo that we've been living is to really turn a blind eye to what a fucking toxic disease we've become. And that's why artists put lines about becoming cancer. It's cliche now, I guess. I think maybe this is what my friend and or antagonist, I had an interesting argument, and it didn't mean for it to become an argument, on the phone with someone during, a kind of like, let's get to know each other, really long conversation where we got into some serious topics. Anyways. So yeah, Mother Earth, what does she want? She doesn't. Oh, and the flat earthers, like, I found this meme, that's what I was trying to tell you, which I now can't find on my device. Memes hide for me. They play this game where if I'm very specifically trying to reference it, because as you'll note, if you spend enough time on the internet, conversations get repeated by different people, then it's basically the same conversation. The same sorts of questions get asked over and over again. Human beings are having thoughts that are not all that different from one another. Now, some of the perspectives through which we filter those thoughts might be radically crazy, but that's because we've been trained like hungry, monkeys that don't know where the next meal is going to come from, to adopt and accept and see the world through ideological constructs. As long as we, think that it's important to believe in them, we shall. The funny thing about belief is that belief is not just a commitment. There's two things that's funny about the word belief. in ye old ancient times of yore, when Christos was walking the earth and saying the things that he said, to believe, which is pronounced differently than it is today. I just made up that pronunciation, by the way. I'm not a historical neural linguistic expert, but I do know a thing or two, and I do know this is a fact, and you can look it up, and you can do your research. Go to a real library, maybe one at a university, and look up the book on those little computer things that only look up books and aren't connected to the internet. So you're not Googling it and finding it on Amazon. And you will find books that can blow your mind open, because we still sort of have all that stuff that, ancient cultures left for us to understand. Well, not all of it, but some of it. The stuff that we don't burn every few generations to hide away from the masses, all that wisdom. So I'm going around in circles and distracting myself, because this was a very impromptu. I hadn't done an episode in a long time. I've been on hiatus, handling issues on an interdimensional project of great import that takes me away from this place, in this locality where I can record these little ramblings of mine. We have to radically shift not just the way we think, because then if we only shift the way we think about it, we cause ourselves pain and suffering, because we go through all the cycles of we go through all the stages of grief, and we cycle through it kind of hard because we don't realize that we're grieving, you see. But ask any vegetarian, they've gone through their trauma of it, and are still going to process it again and again, because that kind of thing is cyclical. Ancient teaching, everything comes back around till you've really, really, really learned the lesson. Sometimes the universe is a bit sadistic about it. So we can't just change our minds. We also have to take action on that. And yes, that can be overwhelming and scary in and of itself. But one of the things that gets overlooked is that, or rather, a stumbling block is the question, how do we get everybody else? You can't force everybody else to get on board. And there's no forcing. One of the primary, brain magic truths about people, and it's why we trend. This is why we circle the wagons and pick teams and have duke 'em out fights over stuff and ideas. We are wired both independently in our wet gear up here in the skull case, in the flesh envelope. We have our own little experience and our own little impressions, but we're also networked emotionally, energetically, and conceptually. We are networked to a place where we tap into a deeper sense of this is the driving intent, and this, a deeper sense of intent and a deeper sense of some kind of common, it's what we call common sense, but it's kind of ridiculous because in purely materialist terms, or to put it psychologically, in purely non-mystical, secular Freudian terms, there's no real event that we can call common sense. There's no real phenomena in reality, because whatever any given group of people might think makes sense may not make sense to people way over there at all, ever. Nothing can achieve commonhood, especially pre-internet, pre-technology revolution. And that's also kind of sort of not an accident. But now, flash forward to the future that we live in. We're on the brink of, if they don't already secretly have it over at DARPA, machines that can literally read your mind. You know, dun dun dun, like we're getting there. A few years ago, like the big scary obstacle was preventing robots from being able to climb objects, like go upstairs or climb over obstacles. That was scary because once they could do that, then they could chase you down, you know, post-apocalyptic, burning city rubble streets of destruction, and then shit gets real, and then we suddenly made all the horrible nightmares of robotics come true. And, you know, good for us for not having quite gotten there yet, but we just keep steamrolling towards it. The same is true, it has been true for a while, of the sort of controlling default mind conditioning. And there's a reason why in Chinese culture and in like Confucius, I think it was Confucius, one of those fellows from Chinese culture said that, you know, you have to, and I'm paraphrasing crazy and, you know, faux translating into kind of modern terms, you have to train people to be able to cope with this. And by this, I think he meant society and the existential dilemma of being a talking monkey that wears clothes and needs to fuck and has to eat, but, you know, lives in a world where he doesn't really feel like a bird in the sky or a squirrel in the tree anymore. And for those who don't understand what I mean by that, those animals don't have anxiety. You know, like we've given ourselves that gift, that we freak out about our own circumstances and our own experience of the universe, whereas the bird and the squirrel and the bee and all the rest of nature from which we are born, which we are genetically identical to. That's the other thing people sort of don't own in their spiritual understanding of things, or don't comprehend at an intellectual level either, is that if you look at a visual graphic map of the relationships in evolutionary genomics, it all spirals down to a point, to a singularity, in a very sacred geometric, the geometry of sacred geometry unfolding. Looking at genetics, that spiral is like you can see the path of it collapsing if you were to be rewinding the tape of history. Why is this important? Because it validates that not only so if every human being on the planet is 99.999999 plus a million nines, identical genetically to every other human being on the planet, what does that really mean? That means we're not any different, that we're literally copies of each other, of whatever 100,000 people survived the bottleneck event that genetics and science and archaeology are sort of slowly converging on, which someday I personally argue, as an amateur intellectual, a armchair philosopher and theorist, I argue that if you put together a couple of the different puzzle pieces that are kind of marginalized and swept over to the side, you can sort of start to see a potential structure or a theory, that this might happen on a cyclical basis. And that all human beings might have been achieving some achievement, and either it backfired or failed, or those who wanted to keep going with the ego experiment, with the Mars experiment, however you want to call it, with the obsessive compulsive investigation into wanting more, which is an endless spiral of getting more and then wanting more and then getting more and then wanting more. And there's a third step in there, just doing that which it takes to get more, which usually becomes ugly because it's always hard to get more. It's especially hard to get more in the beginning when you don't have very much. And then when you've got too much, getting more gets notoriously complicated because it gets both boring and just physically more challenging, or the world makes it more difficult or whatever. That's not my main point. So love your mother, yo. The world is a vampire. as that wasn't Kurt Cobain. Who was that? That was the other '90s Smashing Pumpkins. Smashing Pumpkins guy. The world is a vampire, except it's not a blood sucking bath that materializes and then tries to like seduce you, but suck your blood out. It's an energy vampire, and it's by design, right? So relax. There's two things. There's the world, and then there's Mother Earth. Let's get into that real quick on World Day, on International World Day. The world is the shared concept matrix in which we all cohabitate and co-create the intellectual sort of quote unquote common sense or common norms that are all, if you really think about it, ideological constructs that are, in other words, descriptions of that which is. That's the world. So in art and in expression, I think this is consistent, whenever we're talking about the world, we're talking about the society in which we live and the systems by which that society operates, right? And it's easy to forget that didn't spring out of nature, other than it fell out of our mouths. But that didn't grow out of the tree. The tree doesn't give two shits about that world. That world does not exist to the bumblebee and the cat and the bird and the sky and the water. And who cares, right? It doesn't matter. Those are non-thinking things. No. Here's where it matters. The most important thing that we could come to terms with right now as a species before we run the risk of decapitating ourselves is the deep, profound, personal, intellectual, spiritual, and energetic comprehension of the fact that all of that which is alive, sentient, conscious, self-aware, and made manifest by that crazy little thing we call God. So maybe, just maybe, we should stop killing each other over it. We should stop killing them about it, and start reorganizing the way we live every kind of aspect of society. Instead of having these trite little holidays, no offense to everybody, Earth Day, awesome, it's great. Baby steps, totally. But if the ego trap of politics, and it's funny that I bring it to you on Earth Day, and I'll tell you why I get like really heavy on this day and why I haven't broadcasted in a while. Earth Day and 420 are sort of like the only spiritual holidays that I celebrate. And why did I open with a bunch of awkward references to Hitler? Because it pisses me off that it's there as a distraction. Because it just opens the door to that entire can of worms of isms. But it's an excellent example. What is the problem of Hitler? Never mind the arguments about which version of history is correct. Let's look at hate organized and made manifest into nationwide geopolitical, armed forces. That's the ego trap. That's the same thing. That's the same problem as why we keep, chopping down our mother's lungs and digging up her bones and draining out her blood. It's ego doing it and convincing us that it's okay and seducing us in doing so because it's a fun ride of short-term pleasure and profit. Profit in the capital, all caps sense of the term profiteering. And I know that I'm like a short album on loop because I come back to a lot of the same themes, but that's sort of the point of the project and of any ongoing conversation is, do these themes really continue to connect and make sense together when you layer in other ideas, right? So the ultimate, most important concept there, and it's perfect thing to be like the theme of my Earth Day episode, I think, is the deep need rather to address and rediscover, re-engineer, rethink. I think rediscover is the most powerful word there. Our relationship and our ability to commune, which is the first part of communicate, and that's not an accident there. Why those two words have that common root, right? this whole mess we're in was created and has been perpetuated and made worse because we keep thinking that it's fine to let the status quo go along and let other people make decisions about how our society functions, and that we tolerate it, and that's fine. And of course, there's an argument in the opposite direction, which is that nihilists and everybody on that side of that division can say like there's nothing to be done but to experience the experience all the way through. And I'm like, yes, and I'm fairly certain, I'm certainly fairly certain already at this point that there is a voting process going on. You vote with your, how there's a saying, you don't just vote with your, in the ballot box, you vote with your dollars or with your wallet. How you spend your money massively influences and is a metric by which the system of systems that we call economy sort of shapes reality in a way. And we do indeed vote with our dollars. And we need to reform all that. But as one of the saints of whatever religions you can imagine that might celebrate April 20th as a spiritual holiday, and shout out to the first Church of Cannabis out on the East Coast. I can't remember the state. I think it's Louisiana. I could be totally wrong about that. But ladies and gentlemen, there is indeed a Church of Cannabis out in the American Southwest somewhere, and I think we should all start making a pilgrimage there to visit and make personal face-to-face contact and start building that, because there is indeed we can play the game, the religion game, all right, and we have to be the change we want to see in the world, correct? Everyone loves that saying. It's pretty awesome. But that means, taking on the personal responsibility to wear some of those outfits, to put on some of those hats. And I do think that there is a power in communing and community. And it's important that that process directly address the issue that we have for a very long time blinded ourselves emotionally, spiritually, energetically, intellectually. We have prevented ourselves from comprehending clearly the organic reality of the process we call planet Earth. Because it's not a place, it's not a thing, it's not an object, it is not a highly sophisticated, complex, self-organizing collection of objects either. Like that meme that I was trying to reference that I couldn't pull up says, like, it's side by side. I may have already talked about this, and I feel silly if I'm just repeating myself. Oh, I would feel epic fail if I'd basically already recorded this ramble and I hadn't done it on Earth Day, because it's so interestingly Earth Day themed. But there's accepting that the world is round as an ideal. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups and I'm trying not to explode. Round Earth. It's got a picture, right, of a sort of ordinary person not having a lot of magical brain activity, as in the other pictures below represented by magical, sparkly, rainbowy type, cosmic coolness emanating from their brain. And then there's Flat Earth. It's an improvement. They've achieved some new activity level of consciousness and mind expansion. And then there's Parallelogram. And then there's I think. Oh no, it's hollow. The next one's hollow. The world is hollow. The Earth is hollow inside. And then Parallelogram. And then there's the awareness that there is no actual place called Earth. There's just each of us as independent unities of coalescence here, projecting our shared consciousness, awareness, having an interaction with the field, the synesthetic field of energy wave or probability wave functions, and filtering them into a common shared experience that we constantly sort of reinforce to each other and taking that as reality. That's the ultimate. Why is that really awkward, so hard to make snappy and cool and attractive to millennials? Why is that like the ultimate thing? Because that's the reason that sentence is so weird and strange and awkward, is that it doesn't even begin to approach to describe what the phenomena is actually like to perceive that. It's just an abstracting out into words to try to convey some vague beginning of a notion. And that's not always the sexiest. But believe it or not, it is one of the most important things that we could do, is to like see our mother clearly and engage in the behavior altering, life altering abdication of the constructs that we cling to, which keep us in this rut that we're in. Oh, I was going to say that lots of people are already foaming at the mouth, calling for revolution on this front, because Mother Earth is being so brutally abused, and it's been obvious since forever ago, since our native brothers and sisters warned us about not being able to eat money. And like I said, this all goes back to the Tower of Babel. Not to get all quasi-religious on you. If you're a new listener, that reference probably doesn't make sense, but dig deep, there's old episodes about that. Once we can achieve all that, then our relationship has whole other areas of depth to get into, because our mother's standing around going, tisk, 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 children. You're so caught up in this crazy nonsense game that you invented for yourselves that you are not doing the work that is required of you in the universe. It's like when you're skating by in school, on Crip Notes and cheating and paying someone to write your papers. Like, that's awesome that you're getting all C's and you're only failing one class, but do you not perceive that which you're fucking up? And that's important in an urgent way here in the material plane, because it is literally a test. And while it's awesome when we fail the test and we get reset and we go back to a bottleneck event and we go back to barely surviving and we go back to less than 100,000 people, but it hurts and it sucks and it causes even more pain, and we've done it a few times. Some of us are just hoping that this time is the time when we get off the Thanks for listening, folks. If you have no idea what I've been talking about and want to urgently ask me questions about it, please find me on Facebook or Instagram, or drop me an email. All that information is available on my profile, or you can just type in Mr. Zeppa on any of those platforms, and I should come up. Happy Earth Day. I hope you responsibly rocked out to a happy 420 day yesterday. And I hope that you experience peace, love, and grooviness here and now, in this moment, and then carry it forward with you throughout the rest of your day. I'm going to awkwardly do my April 20th, What 420 Means to This Guy episode several days late, because I've been busy with work. And as per being a responsible citizen, as a responsible citizen as I can be, I certainly didn't celebrate until I got home from work last night. And by that time, it was way too late, and I was way too tired to even wrap my brain around recording an episode. So stay tuned for that. That should be coming out next